A playwright retaliates against those responsible, but a team of rebels changes the sound and style of country music forever.
Somebody write this!
Hi, and welcome to Somebody Write This, where we use a random plot generator to give us an idea, and then we brainstorm how that could be a thing somebody might want to write. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Jenny, and to help us with our brainstorming today, we have a guest. Let's welcome J. Trevor Robinson. Hi!
Hello! Happy to be here. Excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into our brainstorming, let's take a little bit of time to get to know you. You're a writer. Let's start off just by getting a sense of what kinds of stories are you really drawn to, either to write or to read or watch elsewhere. What kind of stories really speak to you?
Well, a lot of what I write and what I like to read has definitely a horror flavor, not necessarily like buckets of gore, but, stories that go in deep and get you unsettled. A lot of my desire to be a writer comes from getting a big stack of, very worn, sometimes waterlogged Stephen King books from my older brother when I was probably still too young to really be supposed to be reading them. The Dark Half actually scared me so bad the first time I picked it up that I had to put it back on the shelf for about 6 months.
Horror is an interesting genre to write because you're really trying to evoke a very specific feeling.
Yeah.
So, what has worked for you in that? And what have been times where you started writing this and you're like, this isn't scary at all. How can I, what is this? So, yeah, some of the tips that you've learned from this.
I'd say the biggest tip I could give to any horror writers is write about stuff that scares you personally, because then you'll really be able to tap into, what about it is so freaky. Like my newest novel, The Mummy of Monte Cristo, it features kind of in the background as a historical event to the main story, but it features a major zombie uprising across 19th century Europe. And zombies freak me out. Shaun of the Dead was a little too scary for me. But because zombies freak me out so bad, I can really get into the characters' heads and be like, yeah, it was terrifying living during that time.
Horror sometimes has it comes sometimes with sort of a stigma as a genre, which I don't think it should, but I'd love to hear you as a writer of horror defend it. What do you think horror adds to the culture, to the community? What do you think is so great about it that people keep coming back to it?
I think I don't necessarily want to use the word addictive, but it's what's coming to mind. But one of the really gripping qualities of it is it really lets you kind of turn your fight or flight response into a toy. Because you're still triggering all the same parts of your brain that respond to, oh no, there's a threat here. Something's wrong. I got to get out of here. But you're in a perfectly safe environment. You're curled up, in your favorite chair with a book that you can close and put down at any time. But you're still getting those adrenaline rushes and that wonderful feeling after it kind of wears off of, that was nice. Coming from it from a bit of a brain chemistry perspective, but might be sucking the magic out a little bit.
No, sometimes it helps to have a solid defense of why is this an important literary genre. So your newest one, The Mummy of Monte Cristo, what kind of sparked that initial idea besides just maybe fear of zombies?
Well, the idea for the story itself kind of came from, you remember a few years ago, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, already a fairly successful book, got made into a big movie. And at the time, I had just finished another project and I was kind of looking for something else to do. And it occurred to me I could probably take, an old classic story and give it a fresh twist with some kind of monster involved. And zombies weren't really in my mind at the time, but I was trying to think of, what story could I use and what monstrous twist could I put? I'm counting these off on my fingers as if anyone can see me. But so the story was pretty easy to pick because The Count of Monte Cristo, it's a beautiful 19th century tale of intrigue and revenge and adventure. And most importantly for this purpose, public domain. So
yes.
I had fallen in love with it years ago, when I was pretty much fresh out of high school. And I realized, okay, there's a lot of themes in the story that I could sort of explore deeper or in different ways than Dumas originally did when he wrote it. And now it was just a matter of picking the monster. And well, when a story is as focused on revenge and treasure as The Mummy of Monte Cristo is, it came pretty quickly. Throw a mummy in there.
Nice.
The mummy's curse, the mummy's treasure, pursuing the people who the mummy thinks has wronged him. But yeah, and from there it kind of fell into place of, where can this supernatural element go? Where can that one go? And at some point, I ended up rewriting the French Revolution to include a massive plague of zombies.
That's so cool.
That sounds like so much fun. We're definitely going to make sure and give you a chance to talk more about where we can get that at the end of the episode. But we are actually going to jump right on into our brainstorming now. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'll see if this takes a horror twist. It doesn't look like it will, but we'll find out. So as a reminder, our synopsis that we've chosen is: a playwright retaliates against those responsible, but a team of rebels changes the sound and style of country music forever. There's so much just missing. The but is a weird choice. Like,
right.
Those responsible.
Those responsible for what? Are the team of rebels responsible? Or is it somebody else responsible? And if so, responsible for what?
Responsible for ruining the play, creating the play, inspiring the play.
Is it a country music play?
I was going to say, how does it connect to the country music? Is it a country music play?
Country music version of a rock opera.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Rock of Ages, but it's about, my truck left me, my dog left me, my girl left me.
There's a handful of country flavored musicals, but not a lot of them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of intriguing. I really am fascinated by the sequence of events here. The playwright retaliates, but then the team of rebels changes the sound. So how does that affect the retaliation? Does it stop it?
Yeah.
Does it further it?
Yeah, where does the story start?
The retaliation sparks off this new country music revolution somehow. Maybe they start using the pipe organ more.
Is the team of rebels, are they on the playwright's side or against them, do we think? Are they working together or just completely separate?
And are they specifically rebelling against the status quo of country music or against something else entirely? And country music just happens to be caught in the crossfire.
Okay, I like the idea that it's a group of maybe young musicians fighting against the sound of country music and the style of country music. It makes me think a little bit of even most recently the Lil Nas X with Old Town Road, where there was just this huge backlash about this isn't country, and him being like, it absolutely is.
Orville Peck performing with his fringy mask thing.
Yeah. So maybe it's a group of young artists or old artists. I don't know. A group of artists rebelling against the narrow view of country music, and somehow involving a playwright retaliation.
The feeling I'm getting about the playwright here, and you guys let me know if this fits. What if it's like a playwright who wrote this play, and maybe it didn't go off so well just as a play, but then somebody else decided to make it into a musical, and the playwright was like, no, not like that.
Yeah.
Right? This is my art, you can't do that, but they already signed over the rights or something, so they have to retaliate her.
Is this like an unlicensed adaptation, like that high school that put on a musical production of Alien without any permission?
What?
Did this? Yeah, there was a high school that put on a stage production of Alien without any licensing.
Oh my gosh.
The studio
That
came and
sounds
basically
amazing.
said it got enough media attention that the production company was like, okay, you can finish the run, but nobody else should do this. Don't do this. You can really get in trouble for this. So is this a group of people who take a play that this person wrote and convert it into a country rock opera, a country opera, and the playwright hates it?
The rehearsal space is really close to his.
Yeah, and he absolutely hates it, but they've already changed the sound and style of country music forever. Like, it has a lasting impact, even if it's short-lived.
It almost feels like it's one of those stories where the storyline starts off very small stakes, and then sort of almost gets swallowed up as a subplot by the country music world just getting rocked to its core.
I just got this great image of the playwright, just by sheer coincidence. The playwright is somehow neighbors with some of the people who are writing and rehearsing the musical. And so at first he's just annoyed by the noise going on next door, but then he realizes, hey, that's my play.
Yeah, this sounds familiar.
So I think I found a way to connect this. So this group of people adapts this playwright's work into a thing, and he says, no, I don't like this. But because he shuts them down, they end up wanting to draw attention to it and being like, hey, we should have been able to do this. And so they go on social media and they end up releasing all their songs much more widely than they actually would have been if you just let it go. It would have been just a little local production. Nobody would have noticed. Nobody would have really cared.
The Streisand effect.
Yeah, exactly. And so they start releasing their songs and they're unique and they're different and there's something that isn't really popular and known in the country music scene. And so it starts changing things. So his retaliation led to the changing of the sound and the style.
Because the thing is, like, if you're gonna write a song based on a story, that's one thing, and I believe that like would be allowed. But if they took the whole story and turned it into a musical, that would be an issue with copyright.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they just released their songs, that's totally illegal.
Yeah, they release the songs like one at a time and saying, hey, we didn't get to perform this. We think this deserves an audience.
Interesting.
And maybe like somehow they managed to find some sort of common ground towards the end, and they actually get the playwright involved. It's like, look, we love what you were coming up with. Come on, help us bring this home.
I'm trying to figure out if it would be interesting to have the playwright have a connection to country music to begin with.
Yeah, are they a country music purist and don't like not only what they're doing with his story, but also what they're doing with the music?
Yeah. Or maybe already has an antagonistic relationship.
Maybe they were a country musician.
or maybe they hate country music and want any other music to represent their play.
Maybe
the playwright's dad was a country music star traveling around trying to make it big, and now they kind of resent country music in general for my childhood.
Both possibilities kind of work. I'm wondering about the scope. Is this like a big national kind of brouhaha, or is it like small town high school?
I think it would have been small town high school until he got involved, and then it becomes across the nation.
The songs start going viral on TikTok and everything.
Right.
Or the non-licensed, Kmart version of TikTok that it gets renamed to for the sake of the story.
Right.
So do we think the playwright comes around at the end, or are they just like, does he settle in and say this is okay, or is he forever a little bit antagonistic and they're the joys that they forge ahead regardless?
I don't know. I think we have to know more.
My gut says somehow they get together, not get together, but you know what I mean, find common ground in the end somehow, but I don't know, maybe it would be more interesting if they don't.
Yeah, well, yeah. The but kind of implies that, okay, so there's, the rebels did a thing, the playwright retaliates, but a team of rebels changes the sound and style of country music forever. Like that suggests a reconciliation, a compromise at the end to me. But it could go the other.
And maybe not even at the end. Maybe this is like an Act 2 thing where they reconcile and then he becomes one of the rebels and helps them to change country music.
Let's write the sequel.
Yeah. So one of the I think the common thread in both of these, both the playwrights getting adapted into something else and the country music changing, could carry with it a theme of an art purism. This is the way that art is supposed to look, and transforming it into something else is not valid. And obviously there are actual issues with copyright with that. There's a reason.
Right.
But it is a big question about, like, if you take do you morally, let alone legally, have the right to take somebody else's work and transform it? Do you have the right to mess with a genre that's been around for hundreds of years?
Right. Yeah. How far can you take a derivative work?
Exactly. And for a lot of people, that's a big question. For a lot of people, they feel very strongly about that. And I feel like those two threads are running through this in different angles, but the same thread. And they could resolve together in a really interesting way, I think. I don't know how, but...
There'd definitely be a room for a writer who's very passionate one way or the other about intellectual property laws to make a poignant statement through this.
Intellectual property versus creative expression.
Yeah. We are at the point where we're going to have to get a title. We're going to figure out what to do with this. Our title is The Last Ferry in a Portal, Ferry.
Okie dokie.
Which was not where I was. I mean, we could go the lazy route and just say this is the name of the play.
Right, well, that was my first thought, because I thought, well, of course, but listen, because if it's a country music musical, if they decided to use country music for it, that would be really weird. That would be a strange juxtaposition to what is obviously a science fiction play.
Yeah. Maybe that's the nature of the change in country music, the introduction of sci-fi or maybe even fantasy elements thanks to
Yeah.
bringing in this playwright's work. Because at least from the country music I've heard, you don't hear that a whole lot.
Like,
Yeah.
instead of Daft Punk, you have Dude Punk. Or...
That a change from his original play as well.
Maybe the play is already like very either sci-fi or fantasy, depending what kind of portal we're thinking of.
Yeah.
Whether it's a portal to like another dimension or to the Fey realm or something like that. Ferry could be a play on words as well.
It could.
Well, going back to Jay's one of his previous thoughts, you said, what if the playwright's father was like travel all around country music and he got very resentful of that? He's like down to earth country American flag guy. Like, did his son decide to go way off the deep end with geekery to contrast that? And that's why he wrote plays like that.
His rebellious phase.
Okay, if we don't go the lazy route, what are the other options for this title?
That I don't know.
They might be in a coastal town where there are actual ferry boats going around.
Okay.
And
I'm not sure where else to go with that, actually.
Portal's a very evocative word because, I mean, at its heart, it does just mean an opening or a doorway. It connotes an unusual doorway or opening.
And the last ferry, like, presumably there have been other ferries, but this is the last one. Why are there no more ferries? Is it the last one today or the last one ever?
Here's a terrible idea in my head. What if...
Say it!
What if the play is called The Last Ferry and the students perform it in a portal? And he's like, that's not the way my story is meant to be done. Don't use that idea. That was just the only other idea Roach was throwing around in my head.
Maybe it's like the general portal of social media that connects us all to each other, and that's how they're releasing their songs.
On a more serious note, like coming off of that, I do like the idea of the in a portal being, these things don't fit. These ideas don't fit. So I like the idea of the in a portal being something added by the transformation of it. So maybe it is, the play is called The Last Ferry, but their version of it is called The Last Ferry in a Portal. Because they add something to it. Maybe they're changing some of the plot a little bit and adding in this sci-fi element. Maybe it was a rural country town story about a ferry, and they start working on it. They mash it up with country music because it was the most natural fit. And then as they go on, they end up with this idea that they want to change it, and they want to add a portal, and they want to add sci-fi electronica sounding music.
Well, I like that because like The Last Ferry sounds like a lovely historical fable of a play.
Yeah, sounds very peaceful.
And adding a portal to it could understandably make the creator very annoyed.
What? They're ruining it! Oh!
This is my touching, expression of how my father's traveling was affecting me, and now there's aliens in it. What have you done?
And I like that because initially, because it really it adds a little bit more sympathy, I think, to the playwright, because it's easy for people to see how adding a portal to this quiet rural story would mess with it. And so it really can become kind of a battle between, we need to do something new and creative, but is this really the way to do it?
Do you guys remember the Friends episode, one of Joey's plays, where it's like this farmhouse or whatever, and then this ladder with the lights come down and he's joining aliens and going into space? That's what this reminded me of.
This angle kind of keeps the playwright from just being, crotchety comic relief, and starts giving more for the reader to kind of sympathize with. Of I don't think I'd like it if someone did that to my work.
Exactly, it's a more balanced fight between the two. It doesn't paint one as just the bad guy. And so the name of their production is The Last Ferry in a Portal, and he is just irate.
Act 2? What Act 2? I didn't write.
Who are these characters with non-human names?
The twist later doesn't work if so-and-so has 4 arms. What have you done?
Okay. We are right about at time to wrap this up, and I feel like there's so much more we could get into. I'm really curious about how this resolves. Now that we've
as someone who's written an adaptation myself, this is bringing up a lot of thoughts of what if Alexandre Dumas just walked into my room right now? Is like, what have you done to my book?
How could I defend this?
Me.
Oh well, see, there's the horror element we were looking for. Obviously the playwright is already dead and comes back as a zombie. He rolled over in his grave.
It's a time portal, and the playwright's work was in public domain, and now all of a sudden he's in the present day. It's like, first of all, what have you done to my work? Second of all, what's a smartphone?
I kind of love that because it takes the legal copyright issues out of it and focuses just on the artistic moral question of is there a problem with transforming things, which I don't think there is, but I think looking at it, I think could be interesting. I don't know. Well, that's a whole new story we just opened up.
We just turned this inside out like 3 times. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in our wrapping up, we just wrote 3 more stories.
And I feel like to really explore this, whatever somebody writes from this has to be musical. We need examples of what kind of music this play turns into. Somebody write a song, please.
Someone ends up making some sort of vaporwave country music mashup.
Yes. I would listen. That would be fun.
Listen to that.
All right. Listeners, we apparently could go on about this for a lot longer because we have so many ideas for this. But we are going to turn it over to you. As always, if you come up with any ideas or if you think you know how this should end, email it to us, write to us, tweet at us. We'll give all our social media information at the end of the podcast. We would love to hear all your ideas. We are only 3 people. We would love to hear what folks outside of this room think should be done with this story. I love it. We're going to go ahead and we're going to transition into our final segment where we're going to share some story recommendations. I have been watching a lot of classic Golden Age musicals recently, a lot of ones that I hadn't seen yet and needed to catch up on because musical is a favorite genre of mine. And one of the ones that I recently saw that I just absolutely loved was Bells Are Ringing, which is a 1950s musical starring Judy Holliday and Dean Martin, and she plays she works in an answering service back in the 50s when answering machines didn't exist. They could call, and she would pick up and take the message and transmit it to the person later when they were home. And she ends up getting way too involved in her clients' lives and wanting to help them out and making friends with them, which she's not supposed to do. And it is just a delightful story. It's very fun, and Judy Holliday is amazing in it. She just absolutely lights up the screen. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that one. I definitely recommend it. Bells Are Ringing. All right, Jenny, we're going to toss it to you. What would you like to recommend this week?
I'd like to expand on a recommendation I did several months ago, possibly a year ago. Goodness. Wow. Anyway, there's this horror writer, Jay, you got to check this out. Her name is Bonnie Quinn, and it started out just as a series on Reddit No Sleep, which is horror short stories, but she's put out 3 books, and I believe she's about to put out the 4th at this time. And the first one is called The Man with No Shadow, and the series on Reddit is How to Survive Camping. And it's just excellent storytelling. She has built this world between herself and her imagination and the reactions of her readers, and it's just gorgeous. Go check it out.
All right, Jay, what would you like to suggest for our listeners?
Well, what I'd like to suggest is a book, a young adult sci-fi book called Becoming Human by Amy Michelle Carpenter. It's about 3 teens who are growing up and kind of learning together what being human actually means, but only one of them actually is human. His name is Carter. He's a bit of an outcast because his dad used to be a prominent scientist until he flushed his career down the toilet by announcing that he believes in aliens at a White House press briefing. And the other 2 teenagers, being aliens, one of them is named Kokab, from a planet where they suppress their emotions, and it's all about being the perfect cogs in their social machine. And the other one is Ags, who her culture is a lot more about getting involved in other planets, and she's a bit of an Earth culture and pop culture junkie. And they both come to Earth for conflicting reasons. They cross paths with Carter, and their missions and how Carter gets sucked into it, they're exciting enough on their own, but what really shined for me is how Carpenter creates these alien perspectives that are so different from what we would be used to, but she keeps them in a place where you can really relate to them. Even Kokab, when she's early in the story, very much in the I must be a perfect cog mode, you can still relate to her and understand what she's going through to a certain extent. And it's just, that's hard to do.
That sounds really
it's
awesome.
Very, so yeah, that's my recommendation.
All right. So before we go, first of all, Jay, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to join us on this. It has been an absolute blast, and I really love where this has gone, this story.
It was great. Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Before we go, I want to make sure that you get a chance to share anything that you want. So social media, projects, where we can buy your book, whatever you'd like to share with our listeners for that.
All right. Well, on social media, on all the usual channels, I am at J. Trevor Robinson. My novel that's just come out, last fall is The Mummy of Monte Cristo, a horror adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo, which one of my favorite reviews says is packed with undead flavor, which that's one heck of a evocation, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I've also got a bunch of short stories out. One of the most recent is in a comedic chicken-themed anthology called Cracked, a collection of excellent chicken stories. That's egg-cellent, spelled how you'd think. And there's links to that and all my other stories, including some that you can read for free because the original collections are out of print, on my website, themummyofmontecristo.com. And you can also buy my book on Amazon and immortalworks.press.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us. This has been a really great time, and I loved the different perspective that you brought to this. That was fantastic.
Yeah, this has been great.
All right, folks, that is our episode. As a reminder, you can find us every other Thursday wherever you get your podcasts.
Follow us on Twitter at WriteThisPod. And if you've been inspired by this episode and have questions or comments or a musical or anything else, email us at somebodywritethis@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you.
We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks, and we'll see you then.
And as they say, at the bottom of the sack is found the worst corn.